My first memory of them was when I was 3. I just assumed that they were older kids, maybe 5 years old or so, because they were a bit taller than me. They were doing minor surgery on my mother, and I was not confident that they would be competent in this effort. One much taller, thin being stood behind me and seemed to be moving my head like a puppet as he thought out loud into my head, "You need to see this," in staccato rhythm, as if each word existed on its own. I remembered this scene all my life, but before I really woke up to the truth, on the occasions that I tried to speak about this, I strangely changed the subject and forgot. There were other events in my childhood that I did not become consciously aware of until I was 21. In September of 91, I went through the trauma of becoming consciously aware of the memories, and on November 2nd, 1991, they gently floated a disc-shaped vehicle in silhouette above me. While watching it, I realized that the action was being done deliberately to interact with me. In the following years, I developed significantly enough in my cognitive abilities to be useful to them. With the intended goal of earning a place among them, I volunteered to do any task that they would let me do. It started with menial jobs like putting stuff away, or moving stuff to people who were taken on board. Eventually, I was assisting with the extraction efforts, and even was allowed to maintain a medical station used for the abductees. On one day, in June of 98, one of the little ones dropped a knowledge bomb on me that was so intense, I have unconsciously blocked it out of my mind. The ramifications of what he said are still a mystery to me. Now it's years later. I'm often aware of when they are around, but even if I go do stuff with them, I might remember some of the event, while other parts are blocked out. There were lots of situations where they evaluated my aptitude, lots of interactions with their technology. I still really can't draw the line between the physical and non-physical aspects of it. Call it astral, or ethereal, or whatever, but a great deal of the interaction was not physical. They would often display a vehicle in the sky when they wanted to re-emphasize to me that they are truly real. Also, cognitive displays of the technology were used to help me recall events from my childhood that they had actively altered my recollection of at the time. I just live with the additional knowledge, and usually don't mention it. I have worked professionally in the avionics industry and accounting, so it's fair to say that I know when to keep my mouth shut. I have a much more developed understanding of the nature of physical reality than most humans. Basically, it's not physical at all. The entire physical universe is a single bosonic field. Its connection to other bosonic fields is its connection to other universes. That is to say, fermions and bosons are different forms of the same thing, and the one can become the other from any third bosonic foundation. How we are tuned into the reality we perceive is a matter of the mind, but we are not alone in this. Reincarnation is reality. We are all much older than our current physical human bodies. Your eyes give you data that your brain makes sense of in the form of images. You have other streams of data entering your mind that can also be made sense of. Naturally, all of your 5 senses. But even your own mental images are a sense of their own. Learning more about this, in my view, is essential to growing in your cognitive development, towards becoming more human. People have tried to describe this from their frame of understanding for millions of years. The descriptions don't usually make sense to people who lack the experience, so many miscommunications have occurred. The extraterrestrials are physical, but they have a much better understanding of what that actually means. If my recollection serves me correctly, then their chart of the atomic elements consists of over 4,000 unique forms spanning across several states of matter. Their form of politics? Some groups do this, some that. Just consider, though, that there are beings situated in many of those other physical states of matter that I just mentioned. The spectrum of what is present reaches far beyond the limited scope of average human observation. For example, one of the biggest divisions of perspective comes from the effort to establish unitary identity. How can one human exist without others? How are we able to claim to be a single being when we are non-metaphorically connected to the rest of humanity, depending on others for everything we ourselves cannot make, produce, or do ourselves on a daily basis? The alien life forms often function in groups that have fully integrated cognitive interaction. Most common in my experience is the group of 3. But even within a single being, are we a single cognitive presence? Even the chemicals we ingest can disrupt our internal cognitive form. Likewise with changes in the weather. If we continue to exist beyond the life of our bodies, how do all these moving parts interrelate? Notice that the Egyptians used canoptic jars for the separate aspects of the soul. Their courts used remote viewing. It's reasonable to infer that they had a perceptual reason for their beliefs. Gaining the ability to perceive gives us access to data, but learning what it means is not a simple task. I do not claim to have all the answers, but I sure as hell have more questions than most. Again, if my awareness is accurate, they are tending to many hundreds of planets that have human populations. Some of the beings consider themselves to be emissaries. Others seem to be preoccupied by a much larger perspective of this universe, of which we are an integral part. Through watching us, they can know things beyond us, like ripples in an ocean revealing the location of distant islands. Some see so far beyond us that they induce fear from their obvious extreme indifference to our personal well-being. Or at least, that's the way it looks from a typical human perspective. I think these aliens have been sent to us because humans have developed in the exact opposite manner. Compared to them, we have much more potential for empathy and caring, but we haven't developed the ability for detachment. Around these beings that induce fear, I simply indicated that the state of fear was caused by them, though it was not intentionally malicious. I think they were trying to present me with an alternative perspective. When they brought me home, and my body went into the fetal position on the waterbed I thought and communicated, "You did this. Fix it." I never felt fear afterwards. Those beings were not evil, just horrifyingly detached and indifferent. True evil can be felt just like heat. Consider the extended elements and states of matter. During the encounter I had as a child, they used a simple implant tool being used as a means of extracting biological material for a litmus-type test. A metal disc was used, and I saw the colors pass through it as the translucent white spiral was inserted. It had been twisted to spiral into her abdomen through the skin, and although it tugged on the skin and passed through, it left no marks. This next scene happened at a time when I was quite accustomed to being around them. A disc-shaped vehicle was pressed against the side of my house at my bedroom window. I was seeing this from my front yard, and could see into an operations equipment platform, and the short beings there directed me above. Several stars were clearly in view. Instead of being faint dots of light, they were each enlarged to the size of our sun or moon inside of a black square. Each was in amazing detail, green with a yellow wispy equatorial band and yellow polar caps. There were other planets in the array as well, blue with white polar caps, brown with red polar caps, etc. A set of solar systems. I spoke in the familiar staccato rhythm. Who do those belong to? He answered, those belong to the Pope. Obviously, I knew he wasn't talking about the Pope here on Earth, but rather an important religious figure of their species. Many organizations on Earth are modeled after a much more significant extraterrestrial counterpart. I never tried to break association from these extraterrestrials. I realized it was a huge opportunity for knowledge. What is there to gain by avoiding knowledge? If it is truly overwhelming, then that is the limit of your capacity. That's usually what seems to end stages of their focused efforts with individual people. By the time I woke up to the reality consciously of what was going on, I already had a lot of very involved interactions to recall. One of the first things they did was to give me full proper recollection of 5 events from earlier in my life that they had altered in my memory at the time. This was in the form of an unusual type of dream, which was more like a memory playback than anything. Each event was not like other dreams in that there was a clear start, and it only ended in my waking, with that single scene being my only recollection for that night. Each one was of some alien interaction that I once had a clear memory of that was somehow altered. One was of a vehicle picking up people for a school trip. In the dream, I was still seeing the vehicle with the conceptual filter that my mind had used to make the event plausible to my mind. One was of a vehicle dropping kids off after an event. I had remembered the scene, but didn't realize that I had been on board. Obviously, the kids, people, and vehicles were human and mundane in my altered memories, when in reality, they had been anything but. One was of a time when a vehicle had sat down behind my school on a Saturday. Again, I had remembered it as being held in a treehouse by kids from far away that never spoke. This dream was unusual in that the time on board had no light, like doing something in total dark, but there was clear communication with the beings. They let me look around the vehicle, but asked something in return. The exchange was something of a medical exam or procedure. Several of them moved towards me, and moved me back into a room and onto a table. One of them looked into my mind, and found the images he would use to substitute for the actual event. Having this one memory returned to me gives me clear insight into how exactly they are able to prevent most people from becoming consciously aware of them. If you've had abduction encounters and want them to stop, I think it's probably possible to get them to be less involved in your development by hitting a plateau and stagnating. But if they see that you are seeking, learning, growing, they will generally continue to offer their assistance. It is more difficult to break contact with them if they are interested in your DNA. The biggest issue with females is their use in breeding efforts. It helps to be extremely composed and detached. Their involvement is not exactly voluntary. Our DNA has a value in their efforts to help us grow as a species that far outweighs any personal consideration.